Hello, and welcome to the Product Insiders LinkedIn Live series, in which we interview product leaders and learn how they leverage customer insights to navigate tough product decisions. I'm your host, Zach Lyons, Managing Partner of Agile Innovation Advisors. If you're joining us live today, can you please enter where you are from in the chat so we know who is with us? And today, our special guest is Simon Jaud, Product Finance Director at Synapse. And I think I got his name right. I practiced a couple times pronouncing it. So
It was beautiful. It was beautiful.
Thank you. So we'll be asking Simon some questions, but if you have any specific questions for him, please enter them in the chat and we'll get to them as we go through. I know LinkedIn can have a slight delay between when we're saying and when you hear it. So please enter them when they come up and we'll get to them before the end of our discussion. So with that, let's begin. So Simon, thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, I'm so happy to be here.
Thank you for taking time out of your Friday. So my first question for you is, let's just set the stage a little bit and help our audience understand. So thinking about a tough product decision that you've had to navigate in your career, can you please tell us a little bit about your role at the time and the situation?
Absolutely. And I'm going to put this in context too. I'm going to tell you about, when I was working in the financial services at a regional bank, a few years ago. And I want to first set it straight that when you're in financial services, when you work for a bank, the role of a product manager is a little bit different than what is understood by a tech company, right? And I've done both. And so I've been in really awkward interviews where I was interviewing for the wrong role without knowing it because of that. But, at a bank, typically a product manager is responsible to take care of the business, right? And so that person is really minded to make sure that the product makes sense and that there's a good fit and that the product is growing and that the product makes money, right? Where when I work for a startup, there's a lot of focus around the development of a technology and not always the same focus on the actual profitability. So my story is very much about money, all right? And so when I was over there, I was working on the cards team. And, I think that this little story here is really going to tell you, how careful you need to be when you're designing your own product, because of course you have a target, but then there are some people who take an interest in your product that is, they're not your target. And then bad things can happen afterwards, right? And so I was at that bank there working on cards, luxury cards, luxury travel cards, like the kind of thing that you would see out of Chase Sapphire Reserve, right? That would be a great example of that level. The kind of cards that have a high annual fee, a lot of nice benefits to compensate for those fees, and that in principle are meant to kind of like cement the relationship between your customer base and your product, right?
Awesome. Okay. I'm interested in hearing how this plays out. So what was the challenge or issue that you were trying to overcome? Tell us a little bit about kind of what you discovered or what happened as you were launching this product and managing it.
Right. So I didn't launch that product. I inherited that product.
Okay.
And I got that product at a time where it had been infiltrated by gamers. And I got to tell you, Zach, I am a big time gamer myself. I don't mean video games. I'm, of course, talking about, like card program gamers, maximizing those points, using certain cards for certain purchases because you get more XYZ, reward this rather than that, right? So really gaming a program. And
gaming program,
well, I guess
gaming the system. Gotcha.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yep. And I thought I was a gamer, but after this, I'm going to tell you I'm just an amateur, by the way, because I've seen stuff that was really egregious and impressive. So the program had been designed, originally for a customer base that was intended to be something else. And I'll explain what happened after, but I'll give you an example. One would be able to order a card, open a card account. And then one would be able to, order additional cards with that card account. Okay. And so one would end up paying, a fee, let's say $300 a year, right, for the account. And you would get statement credits for all the cards on the account, not just the main card, right? And so if you're a gamer, if you do that for a living, that's a real nice gift because, essentially you would be able to pay a fee, let's say $300 a year for this card, and then you would be able to get, something disproportionate, like double the value in statement credits. Okay, so
one annual fee, multiple cards under one account. Okay.
Yes. Gotcha. So I would see like one account, 10 cards with names 1 to 10, and then I would see another account, 10 cards with the same names in different orders, right? And so because gamers are social creatures, they would actually team up on those things. Okay, it was amazing. So that's one example, right, where things get abused. Another thing that you would see, let me check my notes here real quick, would be the concierge, right? Because when you're actually a real, the intended user of those cards and you travel a lot, right? It's nice to be able to get reservations when you're traveling. Say you're in London for the weekend, you can, skip the line, go to some great restaurants, some great shows, right? And so there is a whole, industry of, I would say, luxury concierge services that you will pay dearly for as the product manager, so that you can really add that level of service to your users. And so what people had figured out here is, in this case, they would be able to start a transaction with the concierge, use their points there, right, and then cancel their transactions and get more dollars per point that way than they would if they had used their points for cashback, right? And
I see. Okay.
So again, it's really all about optimizing, min-maxing. And again, I got that in my head. I'm that kind of guy. So, you have to appreciate the beauty of the effort there. Except that, of course, as the bank, not only are you paying more than you should, for the product that's being purchased, but also you're incurring the cost of all those calls to the concierge, right? We're talking about, like...
Those concierges they're third parties that the bank's paying them to provide the service to the customer.
That's
of the bank.
Correct.
Okay.
Right. So this is not helping with your profitability when that happens, right? And then the third example would be, if you travel, you like to go to the lounge. It was just very generous in that you could bring anybody that you wanted with you, really, and then that the program would auto renew, every year. So then that there was never any sort of, you would be paying even for people who are not using it, right? Just because of dumb system rules, those kinds of things, right? So all those things that kind of like eat away at your margins, just because, it could have been set up differently, right? So this is the way that it was when I found it. And it was pretty scary because when those things happen, they happen quickly. Okay, because there are entire websites devoted to gaming card programs, right? So what happened there is that bank had designed the product because it knew that it wanted to, really deepen the relationship with their base, and their base was very local, very regional. You actually had to go to a branch, okay, to start a relationship and get those cards. And you would go on those websites, and people would describe how they they drove across 2 states to found a branch and open a card, right? And so what happens then here is, as a product manager, even if you would like to tell them no when they apply, there are rules to protect, discrimination in financial services. So if somebody, drove 2 states to get and to apply, you can't deny their application. You cannot, and if they qualify, you can't deny them either, right? So you're forced to bring people in that are not your target. All right.
So if they were credit worthy and you approved them, you couldn't decline them just because you thought they were going to game the card.
That's correct.
You had to approve them. And help me understand something. So all these gaming, and they're sharing this information with their other gaming people on this website. But what was the result as far as the bank? Like, was the portfolio losing money, or what was happening at the time?
Well, so there was an explosion in the number of accounts for that product, which is not normal because this is supposed to be, a mass affluent product, if you want, right? It should be, the one that's the least present in your portfolio. And it just overtook it, because the moment that those posts started to be on Reddit, you would have people driving from, across the country, I guess, right, to the various states where those branches were. And then also all of a sudden the product usage become disproportionate, right? Because you're expecting maybe to get, I'm going to say a number, not a real number, but you're expecting people to use $120 per year on average in their statement credit if they're regular users who are not gaming, and all of a sudden why so high? What am I at, 250, right? So what happens is that you see that stuff go up, like because you're in your dashboards and you see all those costs go up. And ironically, nothing can be done on the spot. There's no way to just turn it off because, again, we're regulated. If you're going to make some changes to a program, you have to provide notice. You're dealing with very large vendors. Everything is a project, right? And besides, the problem always is the same. There's the chance that you're going to anger those customers that you care about because they're going to be impacted. So you shouldn't do anything anyway until you understand the consequences of what you're proposing, right? And
so what did you do? I'm curious. Like, how did you navigate this? So you have real customers, they're using it, you're mass affluent that you want to obviously have a good relationship with. Then you have these gamers who are coming in and gaming the system and abusing it and driving up costs to the bank. And as you said, you couldn't just turn it off. You can't just make changes. So what did you do?
And so, it's not very romantic notion. It's a lot of spreadsheeting is what you do, right? But you make a list of all your products, right? Mm-hmm. In principle, you already understand your costs, so that part is easy. But then you kind of like, you're able to look at who's using what, okay? And then you're able to say, oh, okay, so these are my customers, my real customers versus those other people who are gaming. This is their profile, okay? And they use X much in credit, and they go, they call the concierge X time a month. And when they call the concierge, it's for this reason. And then, they go to the lounge X times a month, and with them, they go and they bring X people, right? So you really need to take time to now create profile. It's really differentiating the profile of your target versus, those uninvited guests, right?
So it's an extra persona of actual people's behavior. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, and then you model, so I knew my prices. So then, you just model the impact of what if I do this, my costs go down by how much, those kinds of things. So you model this until, you're in the money, right? Because at that point, a lot of accounts were just dragging things down. And so you do your modeling, and then after that, you have to do a lot of planning because, even though you think you're not going to anger your customer base too much, there's always a couple of people who might be like me, who might be gamers, and maybe they appreciate that card. And so then you need to have a plan for these people, right? So if somebody, for example, just renewed their annual fee and now we make those changes, well, okay, fine, close the account, we'll reimburse the annual fee, there's no harm done, right? People have to feel respected and not taken advantage of. That's what's really important, right? Or if somebody says, well, yeah, but then I rely on my card, for my credit, that's going to be a problem. Well, we can transition you to a different card. The account remains open. It's transitioned to a different card. There's no annual fee. Your credit report, shouldn't be impacted, right? Excuse me. Or also for transactional people like me, oh no, it's unacceptable. Then you can also make sure that you authorize the people opening up the phone to, give, I would say, a small number of reward points to appease people. And so overall, when you have those things in place, you have to plan for them, right? So you're not taken by surprise, but then you can you can have a smoother transition, is what I would say.
So it's interesting because you have to set policies for all the customers, but really these policies are in place to keep the product profitable because of a small group who are abusing it really and using the product to a degree where they're not profitable because they're abusing it. You can't really act on those individual bad actors and kick them out. You can't really, even if you could identify them, it sounds like you're not even allowed to, right? So. So are you just setting policies then and just restricting the policy? Is that, like, okay, you can only use a concierge once a month, or like, what did you do? Like, how did you actually end up? navigate
Right.
that?
So, to go into the specifics, we start to charge, for example, for additional cards, right? I'm not saying it's anything incredible, right? And somebody who's a gamer in his mind might have thought about this, at the onset, but it's always hard to design
Mhm.
something when it's not you, and you're not the target either, right? When the wrong target shows up. So yeah, so
Right.
you just start, charging for those additional cards. For concierge, again, if somebody canceled their transaction, then we would reverse the transaction and then put back the points, so that there would be no way to get, special cash back out of the concierge. That stopped the behavior. And then, for the lounge, we would just make sure that the things would not, auto renew, and that fewer people could go. But just the fees were enough for the most hardcore of gamers, because people just left. I think that in 3 months, we I seem to recall the portfolio went down, I don't know, 40%, 50%, which
So
should
number
give
number
any
of
product
customers,
manager.
is that the number of customers, or is that the total balances outstanding, or both?
No, the number of accounts, those
Okay, the
card
number of accounts
accounts.
went down 30 or 40% because you
Yeah.
raised the fees, the annual fee. Gotcha. Okay.
And those changes, right? Which of course should be a nightmare for any product manager, right? Because you're
Mhm.
losing 50% of your base, but it wasn't the right base. You shouldn't hesitate to remove to remove the customers that you don't want, right? If they're not the right target. So 50%,
Yeah.
they left because they were not willing to pay the annual fee anymore, those kinds of things, and the portfolio became profitable, right? So that's great. It's really about making the right choices for profitability, is what it is always.
Interesting. So you really fired your bad customers, raised the price enough that they themselves walked out or left, which on the surface initially didn't look great, as you said, 30 to 40% reduction in customers, but then the product itself became profitable because you had lost those bad customers. It's
Right.
interesting.
And I'm not sure if I would say fire the bad customers,
Okay.
because it was their choice. but
Yeah.
but the bottom line here is that some people find product in the value and others don't. Okay.
Hmm.
And min-maxers like me are typically there only for one purpose. And so, somebody who actually had an established relationship with the bank, had been there for a while. That was a I would say a more casual traveler. They got the value that they needed, right?
Right.
And then they chose to keep the card. And people who were just there because, oh, well, I can't make, I don't know, I'm going to say number $500 easy every year. I'm not here. Well, again, is that a customer? I'm not sure.
So, question for you, Simone. How did you decide how much to raise the annual fee by? Like, how did you figure that out to get it to
Yes,
profitability, but still, so
right.
there's a balancing act there, right?
Yeah, well, this is something that's very frequent in the world of cards, because it's a very competitive world, right? You're not in an empty universe. There's a lot of competition. So I've named one comparable before. The Sapphire Reserve card,
Okay.
Chase is an
Yep.
example, right? Amex has the same kind of card, and so you have to position yourself into, where do I think that I fit here, and then
Mm,
the value that I want to give to my users. And again, because we wanted to come through for our most loyal users, we chose a price that was comparable but still competitive compared to the others. That's how you do it, in a way that's a little bit informed.
okay. So you looked at the competitor pricing, looked at how you position against them and their pricing, and then came up with a price. Did you do
Right.
any testing of the price with customers beforehand, or did you just come up with it and roll it out for everybody?
So testing prices, that those kinds of things are difficult, because every time you change a price in financial services, you have to send announcements to everyone. So in
Um,
financial services, testing tend to be, you put it in the market and you see how people react to it, and then if you have to adjust, you adjust it. Otherwise, it's very, very cumbersome. And there's no A/B testing. Well, there's a little bit of A/B testing in marketing, those kinds of things. But again, you're not supposed to you're not supposed to provide the same service at different prices to different people, because again, it would be discrimination.
So you could A/B test marketing, but not necessarily the pricing based on okay, because that's discrimination. So you have to have the same price for all kinds of people. That makes it
you
hard.
can test your offers. Is this attractive? Am I getting, because when you have marketing, you could always say, oh, I'm going to give you 5,000 points, to join. I spend $200 in the first 3 months, and right. So that that you can test because they're campaigns, right? But you can't say, I'm going to charge Zach $50 a year for the card, and I'm going to charge my good friend Simon $25 a year for a card. You can't do that, because these are like pricing and fees, and then you start, discriminating between Zach and Simon.
But so these changes you made led to profitability in the portfolio, and so I assume then that you were sort of seen as a hero, right? Because you actually made the portfolio profitable. Or how did people inside the bank then perceive you as far as the changes you made? Were they happy with us?
Well, the thing here is there was a lot of tension. As you can imagine, these were very stressful times for everyone, right? And the times were especially stressful because every time you do something with bank vendors and all that, we're talking about projects that take months, right? And just because of one of our vendors, we had to delay the switch by 6 months to wait for the next year. Okay. Right. So at that point, tension has built up. And then when you show people leaving, there's even more tension. But I think at some point, to your point, it's about leaving enough time for the numbers to flow in so that people can see the result. And I can tell you one team that was not disappointed is the finance team, because, that makes them happy. But it was a bit of a bummer for the product managers, right? Because you don't like to see your portfolio shrink, but it was a good kind of shrinkage.
Interesting. What would you do differently, kind of looking back and reflecting on it, if you were to do something like this again? Is there one thing that you would change about how you approach this?
Yes, I think I would. I think that, so obviously, we were willing to make some very bold, big changes because we had to. But I mentioned to you, because of a vendor, we had to wait, for 6 months. And if I could go back to the past and speak to my younger self, I would probably insist that we do it right away, because it would have created, possibly some technical issues. But I think that, the financial benefit of handling it, faster would have paid off for those problems. I think that the saving would have been enough to warrant it. But, again, you're in financial services, you if you screw up, you get a lot of attention, you get a lot of calls to the CFPB. So we were as usual, very careful.
So just maybe doing what you did, but a little bit sooner, a little bit quicker.
Yes. Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. And again, I'll remind our listeners, if you do have any questions for Simon, please enter them in the chat and they'll show up. I do want to thank you for sharing that story. Very interesting, fascinating, challenging story, like a lot of product managers face, maybe in different contexts, but the idea of setting price and knowing which customers are good or bad customers and being able to deal with that is it's no easy feat. And you had to navigate that, kind of thread the needle there while sort of appeasing your internal stakeholders, obviously. So I did actually get a question that came in. So let me put that up on the screen. We can look at it together. You use the metric for different customer segments. So, for example, maximizing lifetime value for different customer segments might require different strategies, such as offering higher margin premium products versus reducing friction on low margin, high volume products. So any insight on best practices, so using metrics for different segments.
Got it. Well, right. So that's a great question, Stefanos, because, what's nice about being in a card team is that you have different cards for different profiles and different customers. And to your point, those cards have different profitabilities, but they also, the relationship of your customer doesn't stop at the card. the relationship extends to the deposit products, the mortgage products, HELOC, lending, is there an investment relationship, right? So, it's not unusual that cards are used as loss leaders to acquire, relationship, right? Like I'll go back to my good friends at Chase and the Sapphire Reserve card. When they started this, it was very, very rich, very, very rich offer, and they had a lot of marketing buzz, right? And then they really brought it down afterwards. And so to your point, you need to have a consideration as to whether you're trying to acquire a new base or just deepen, your current base, and that you can only know through those metrics you're talking about, which is customer lifetime and all that. But you shouldn't be doing it just for the cards. You have to do it for the entire relationship, and that's difficult because you have different systems, things that don't talk with each other, and it's always hard to track. This person made me exactly this amount of money. It's always hard to track, right? So you do your best. You get a sense of what you get by segment, and then this determines your willingness to be generous, more or less, based on the offering, your marketing campaigns, those kinds of things.
Excellent. Yeah, most companies have a hard time having one system where they have a holistic view of that relationship, knowing how profitable it is, especially if you have products that are, that are loss leaders. You want to be able to make sure you're making up for that loss, right, in other ways. Interesting. It's a great question. Thank you, Stephanos, for sharing that. I'm trying to see if any other questions come in. I hope those of you listening and Stephanos said thank you as well. So I hope those of you who are listening learned at least one new thing from Simon's story. I know I did. I will encourage you to continue the discussion by entering your comments or questions in the chat. Just like any other post on LinkedIn, we can continue the discussion there. And I always encourage people to ask more questions. I think it's fascinating. We can't cover everything in the short time we have. And if you need help navigating tough product decisions yourself, kind of as Simon just demonstrated in his story, please do reach out. You can message me right on LinkedIn. And I also encourage you to stay tuned for our next Product Insiders event here on LinkedIn. So again, Simon, thank you so much for your time today. Really do appreciate your sharing your personal story. And with that, I can say until next time, I'm your host, Zach Lyons with Agile Innovation Advisors. Take care, everybody.